Brands take a stand. So obviously, we live in a volatile world right now, and I wanted to talk about how brands can actually make a difference in this volatile era. I'll be looking at how to move beyond purpose, to actually reshape cultural narratives, how to tackle controversial, even political causes, and also discuss where brands should draw the line. But first, I want to start with a powerful resident image, perhaps the most important image of our time. This is Jimmy Fallon messing up Donald Trump's hair. Now, Fallon's soft approach to interviewing Trump drew a lot of criticism at the time. The Atlantic actually published a piece called The Embarrassment of Jimmy Fallon, where it said, his platform as a beloved entertainer is a powerful one, rooted in empathy for his wide audience. He could have reflected that by illuminating issues they care about. And on Twitter, there was a big backlash. This tweet here, which received almost 1,000 likes, is particularly insightful. When you are neutral in the presence of racism and bigotry, you are part of the problem. Now, there's a lot of brands out there right now who are Jimmy Fallon, staying neutral, scared to piss people off, and I'm going to explain why that's a mistake. So let's look at this idea of purpose. Brands embedding purpose into everything they do has been a marketing mantra for a few years now. We've been tracking this on Stylus, and we looked in the past at campaigns like IBM's brilliant Smarter Cities project. And this idea of purpose, brands integrating purpose into what they do, is still a powerful trend, as shown by a Doritos campaign before the US election called Rock the Vote. It's a great campaign. I just want to show you a quick clip.
I'm not registered to vote.
I'm not registered to vote.
I haven't found the time, really. I don't like politics.
Yeah, we're twins. Yeah. So I guess both of us are voting.
Old people go out and do that for us.
No taste, no crunch, no choice, because if you don't vote, someone else chooses for you just like this.
I'm not sure if that was a really successful campaign and they all voted for Trump, or if it was a very unsuccessful campaign and they still didn't vote. Now, brands went in this direction of embedding purpose into their work because there's clear evidence that that's what consumers want them to do. They want them to play a part in our cultural discourse. Consumer trust in government and media is low. 69% of consumers globally trust businesses to keep pace with the changing world, but only 47% trust governments to do the same. But I think we're in a different world now, obviously, and brands need to go further than they did in the past. At Cannes Lion this year, Jamie Fuller, chairman of Skins, said, if you want to shape culture, you need to set the agenda rather than merely reflect it. You need to be prepared to take a position on the cultural issues of the day, and in particular, the difficult ones that others ignore. I think this is a brilliant mission statement and really sums up what Brands Take a Stand is all about. Now, we've been tracking the start of this at Stylus in an industry trend we called Get Real, where we looked at brands really beginning to reflect the reality of people's lives. Now, REI is a pioneer in this regard. On Black Friday this year and last year, the company shut its stores and paid employees to enjoy a day outside. Now, this is a massively risky proposition, but it paid off not just in terms of PR and industry awards, but in redefining the brand in the public consciousness. Now, we spoke to Mike Wallen, who's the head of ad agency Omelette, about setting agendas as REI did, and he said brands have to understand how to augment their strategy with storytelling they believe in. It gives them an identity in the world. Sorry, I'm feedbacking a bit here. It gives them identity in the world that's more than just the products they sell. And Wallen himself has put his money where his mouth is in this regard. His agency produced a documentary that explores gang violence in LA called License to Operate. It was a way of proving to clients that Omelette produces great content, not just great ads. And JWT has also gone down this route. You may have seen their documentary series, Her Story, about female empowerment that was broadcast on the BBC in February. And JWT made a key point when they described the motivation for investing in this work. They said the intention was simply to create a new narrative on women. And I think creating new narratives is a key opportunity for brands in this space. Chris Clark from Digitus LBI said at this year's Cannes Lion, people are following bad narratives. It's ever more important that those of us who put work out there use those platforms in helpful ways. Now, Ariel tried a bit of narrative shifting earlier this year with the Share the Load campaign in India. 90% of men in India believe laundry is women's work, and this campaign aimed to alter that perception. A video from the campaign released in February attracted 3 million views on YouTube in 3 days. And BBDO India, who put the campaign together, said, "We felt there's a need for a bigger story of self-examination, realization, and reconciliation." Now that's an interesting campaign, but it's fairly vanilla. SK2's marriage market takeover in China tackled a much more complex issue. In China, unmarried women over 27 are labelled leftovers and considered failures. And marriage markets are set up for parents to post detailed adverts about their daughters in a bid to ensure they're married off at a young age. Now, in response, SK2 organised this campaign.
This is how SK2, an international prestige skincare brand, managed to start a global conversation about a highly controversial Chinese subject. In China, there's an official deadline for marriage. Unmarried women older than 27 are called Shangnu, meaning leftover woman, a term frequently used by the government-funded media to stigmatize single women. In a country where all traditional media channels are controlled by authorities, we needed to make a global news story to support the movement and help local influencers pick it up. SK2 had been using the payoff Change Destiny for years, but only referring to a skin destiny. To make something truly engaging, we needed to make it about life destiny. The one thing that affects Chinese women's destiny more than any other is the pressure to marry young. Tradition plays a huge part, and many parents go to marriage markets to post and match personal ads of their children. We wanted to create a way for single women to tell their parents and society that they are not leftover, but proud and independent. And what better place to do so than at the biggest marriage market in Shanghai? We opened up the discussion and encouraged women to finally speak to their parents.
现在任其自然了，顺其自然了，不催他了。
我和女儿也有了一个更好的沟通。
The campaign was the most talked about in the history of Chinese social media and became the first ever to make the top 10 trending list on Weibo with its 615 million users. Quickly after the launch, the film had over 25 million views and 6.5 million social interactions. Women all over the country joined the movement and shared their own statements about the pressure. We managed to create so much buzz, the very own media promoting the term couldn't ignore talking about the campaign.
Leftover women, fairly or not.
It also had a huge impact globally, with over 1 billion in social reach and over 1,600 news articles across 54 countries. We set out to tell the world that the value of a woman doesn't depend on her marital status, and made Change Destiny mean something.
Now, Pearl Fisher tackled another Chinese taboo in September, launching a new range of tampons, Femme, in a country where attitudes to menstruation are deeply conservative. And we spoke to Pearl Fisher, and they told us they were looking to drive the kind of cultural change young Chinese women have been waiting for and shift perceptions. Now, crucially, the brand considered this move not only a commercial opportunity, but a way to address a real social responsibility and need in China. Now, this is undeniably tricky territory for brands. You might ask, how do I take on controversial causes without damaging my reputation? Well, it's the wrong question. Doing nothing could be more damaging. Silence on social issues could be the kiss of death for brands, said Erin Sharinian, who's CMO at the United Nations Foundation. Especially, he went on, if you look at the way that young customers are engaging with them right now. Over the summer, Smirnoff embraced the contentious subject of immigration. They teamed up with LA street artist Morley during Immigrant Heritage Month on a series of artworks and short films celebrating inspiring American immigrants. And also this summer, Budweiser launched a campaign for its Bud Light brand that it celebrated a range of social issues, including gender equality, gay marriage, and equal pay. Now, this wasn't exactly revolutionary. For a start, the ads only ran on TV in New York and California. But still, it would have been unimaginable from such a mainstream brand even 5 years ago. Now, here we have one of the great slogans of our time. This is important, obviously, when it comes to brands taking a stand. However, a tipping point of sorts was reached back in April when a huge number of businesses reacted strongly to North Carolina's anti-transgender HB2 law. This was a law that required people in North Carolina to use the bathroom corresponding to their biological sex or gender rather than their gender identity. Now, in response, a huge number of brands boycotted the state. PayPal cancelled an expansion that would have created 400 jobs. Apple, Pepsi, Hyatt, Bank of America, IKEA, Uber, scores of others loudly came out against the bill. Quartz pointed out that in 2012, not a single Fortune 500 company opposed North Carolina's law to ban same-sex marriage. But this year, Quartz said, big business finally found its voice. And we spoke to Blue State Digital, who are a marketing agency specializing in bringing brands and causes together. And they said all kinds of companies are coming to understand that consumers won't allow them not to have an opinion on issues of public concern. So what about politics? We'll be discussing this in a minute, and obviously this year it's inescapable. Should brands get political? Well, this is an interesting example of the sort of challenge brands are going to increasingly face as difficult issues consume the cultural conversation, which is obviously a conversation that brands have to be a part of. 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick refused to stand up during the national anthem as a Black Lives Matter protest. And this caused a lot of controversy, and there's now questions over whether his sponsors should continue to support him. And Ad Age took a poll of its readers on this very subject. They had over 4,000 responses, and incredibly 70% said that he should be dropped. Brands fear polarization more than anything, but they shouldn't. It's impossible not to be polarizing in this day and age. And any brand that shies away from this is operating outside of the cultural conversation. As the founder of Patagonia says, if you're not pissing off 50% of the people, you're not trying hard enough. Lush Cosmetics is a particularly interesting case. They've always been a highly political brand, despite many of the causes they champion having little to do with their core products. This image shows the Lush Hand of Friendship soap that they released earlier this year in response to the Syrian refugee crisis. And customers at all of its North American stores were encouraged to write welcome messages to refugees that were displayed in the shop window. Now, Lush raised $300,000 for refugees, but of course, the campaign divided opinion. Here are some comments from the Lush Facebook page, some saying bravo and thank you for supporting these people, some saying they'll never shop at Lush again. But for Lush themselves, it's hugely important to be inspiring this sort of debate. The brand says it's not interested in having easy conversations with its customers. The co-founder of Lush, Mark Constantine, has said in the past, if we're not careful, we end up preaching to the converted. I prefer to be raising issues with people who ought to be thinking about them. And it's working for them. Sales reached £574 million in 2015, with profits of over 30 million. And they now have so much content and such a passionate, mainly Gen Z audience that they're planning to launch a Lush TV channel next year. A TV channel from a soap company. I mean, it's pretty remarkable, but it shows that you can achieve many things when you stand for something. Now, of course, polarization works both ways. Think about Chick-fil-A, the American fast food chain. They are unequivocally opposed to same-sex marriage, yet they top this graph of how aware consumers are of corporate stances. So near the top you have CVS with fairly non-polarizing stance to stop selling cigarettes in CVS stores, and you have the NFL, which campaigned against domestic violence. But right at the top is Chick-fil-A. Now, you may not agree with them, But they've taken a position and they've stuck to it, and it appears to have not done them any harm. The company generates more revenue per restaurant than any other fast food chain in the US. And they've even launched 2 restaurants in liberal New York in the past 12 months, which are both thriving. Sorry about this feedback. I don't know whether I should be leaning back or further forward. Lean back. Down. In. Okay. Oh, more feedback, the quieter I go. Okay, that's counterintuitive, right. So we've seen some brands, it's going to be like this, Trump-esque. Or Bernie Sanders. This is going to be huge. So we've recently seen some brands dipping their toe in political waters. Here is the lovely Michael O'Leary of Ryanair. He came out for Remain during the Brexit campaign and offered cheap Ryanair flights for Brits abroad so they could come home and vote. Now, obviously, he had a vested interest, but this was still interesting to see how few other businesses got stuck in like this. A report from the Electoral Reform Society in September was highly critical of the official referendum campaigns, saying that the general public were ill-informed and misled by both sides. So there is a role here for brands to play, perhaps not quite in this way, but still you wonder what the result might have been if more brands had followed Ryanair's lead. Now, this is an image from a rather more sober and sophisticated reaction to current political and social events. It's MTV and Black Entertainment Television's town hall meeting. And this was a live show that the channels put together immediately after the police shootings of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile and the subsequent attack on Dallas police. And they pulled this together in about 24 hours and streamed it live. And Andre Shaheen, who is the VP Brand Creative Director at MTV, told us that it was about provoking conversation and education. And I think this is an inspiring example for any brand. Build a platform, start a conversation. You might not quite get it right straight away in the Black Lives Matter debate, but it's still a difficult subject for most brands to talk about, which begs the question, where do you draw the line? The Black Lives Matter hashtag was used 2.6 million times in July alone this year, but almost no brands are using it. In fact, after I finished putting this presentation together earlier in the year, Ben & Jerry's were one of the first to start talking about it almost immediately afterwards, not because of this. Well, possibly. Starbucks generated criticism for its race relations initiatives last year, which encouraged baristas to write "race together" on coffee cups in a bid to inspire conversations on racial issues. Now, referring to this campaign, Rich Mintz from Blue State Digital told us that the issue was that the message came from a position of privilege, and that turned some people off. Now, brilliantly, Starbucks learned from that, and a year later launched the Upstanders campaign. Now, the aim of this is to inspire Americans to be compassionate in the face of what the brand sees as the divisiveness and cynicism currently fueling our national discourse. So again, the idea was to transform a bad narrative of discord and dysfunction into one that could create positive change. This campaign features some really great short films, and they all average around 50,000 views each on YouTube. And it's a perfect example of engaging, listening to, and learning from the communities the brand wants to help, rather than imposing a hashtag from above. Now, this is The Good Immigrant, released a couple of months ago. This is something that a brand could have got behind. It's a book of essays on the reality of life for Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people in Britain. The actor Riz Ahmed wrote an essay that was extracted by The Guardian, you may have seen, and it went viral on social media. Now, the book was crowdfunded, but it could have been something a brand got behind. There are these sorts of real opportunities out there. And I'll conclude with one masterclass in how a brand can tackle divisive and painful issues in a way that really makes a difference. This is from Ogilvy Berlin. In April, the agency took on issues of racism and far-right rhetoric when Mein Kampf was republished in Germany for the first time since 1945. So Ogilvy published its own book, My Struggle Against Racism, which highlighted the stories of 11 people dedicated to exposing and eradicating xenophobia and fascism.
We learn launched the first edition of 11,000 books available in every bookstore in Germany. Every buyer joins the struggle against racism too. €1 from every book sold is donated to Gesicht zeigen, an association encouraging people to stand against racism.
Ein Buch wichtiger denn je.
We made Mein Kampf against racism the relevant topic across society. Our campaign went beyond the book. We organized lectures and started a dialogue on social media. In a Europe moving towards right-wing populism, we pleasantly hit the nerve of time. Mein Kampf against racism became unser Kampf against racism.
And according to Ogilvy, the campaign had a measurable impact in the way that people talked about Mein Kampf on social media. They said people were mobilized to comment against the Nazi manifesto. And speaking of Nazi manifestos, I put this together before the election, so this is a really depressing slide now. But I hope I've convinced you that this is not a good strategy for brands to follow. So I'm going to finish with 4 sort of key takeaways. Firstly, stake out your position. In a polarized world, no brand can appeal to all. We've moved from generalized marketing to the kind of brand engagement that will, by necessity, alienate certain consumer groups. But taking an authentic position means you'll stand out, make a difference, and attract a new kind of loyal customer. Secondly, find narratives to reshape. I think this is a really important one. Being purposeful is no longer enough. Brands can use their power to directly reshape negative narratives in the mind of their customers. So look for bad discourse that runs counter to your core brand identity and market a different, more positive story. Engage, listen, and learn. Brands need to understand that they connect with culture from a position of privilege. As such, any cause-driven campaign should ensure it includes and amplifies the experiences of the social groups affected by this cause. It's about immersing yourself in and inherently knowing your market and your brand. And finally, think like a news organization. As a marketer in an always-on world, you're part of the news cycle. As MTV's Andre Chahine said to us, 10 years ago we wrote ad headlines. Now you have to ask yourself, what's the news headline? What will people want to write about and click on?